Welcome back, Project Return to Poetry class. So, I know it's not going to be our traditional class like we're used to having, where we'll read through a poem and go through each stanza and discuss it and make our own observations and thoughts about it and what it means to us. But what you're going to hear today is a little bit about my thoughts about it. So, what we're going to do is at each stage, we're going to go through the stanzas like usual. And of course, we've got questions for you. And I encourage you to get out a piece of paper and make notes about this so you can respond to the poem like we've talked about. And let's go. So, Invictus by William Ernest Henley. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. So William Ernest Henley, Invictus, that's for you today. And so my first question for you today is usually the first question I always ask is, what are your first observations about the poem? What things stuck out to you and what things did you respond to? And usually some of the answers that we'll get is certain words that imply and could be symbolic of other things. And so first off, I just wanted to break down the title, Invictus, which is Latin for undefeated. And so titles are important. And what does that title, Invictus or undefeated, mean? Why did the author decide to use the Latin form instead of just calling the poem Undefeated? What does that mean historically? If the author is using a language that, as my mother said, is as dead as it can be, it killed all the Romans and now it's killing me. That's not true. We use Latin for a lot of things. But what does that mean when the author decides to use a Latin word instead of the traditional undefeated? And so, out of the night that covers me. Let's take a look at the first stanza. And what can night infer? As a symbol, it can be many different things. When we think about night and day and the contrast between the two things, black and white. And night implies a darkness, that time of night. So out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole. Black as the pit. What is the pit? And remember, whenever we read through poems and we see a letter that's capitalized that shouldn't typically be capitalized, we're changing that into a noun. We're changing that into a person, place, or thing. And I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. And unconquerable, wow, what a powerful word, unconquerable. It brings us back to the Latin word invictus, meaning undefeated. For my unconquerable soul. He's coming out of a dark place, the black pit, and he's coming out of it and suggesting that God maybe could be making him invincible. And so that's the first stanza. So now let's take a look at the second stanza. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. And so we think about the clutch clutching at something. And clutch is a very strong word, and it means to grasp or to seize something tightly or eagerly. And in the fell clutch of circumstance, what does that sentence mean to you? I have not winced nor cried aloud. He's not complaining when circumstance has clutched him. Under the bludgeonings of chance, the bludgeonings, thinking about bludgeonings, it's a very violent word. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. He doesn't complain, and we can think about the second stanza in terms of ourselves, and when we've been the victim of circumstance or the passive person in circumstance, or in a circumstance rather, and when we've suffered and we've not winced or cried aloud, we've not complained about it, because at the end of the day, though we've suffered, we don't go forward into the future bowed. We don't let it break us down. We're not subservient, not a slave to circumstance, chance, or fate, And that's what I took away from that second stanza. Now for the third stanza. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. The third stanza is a very powerful stanza. First off, beyond this place, where is he talking about? Could he be talking about our world, the earth? And what is he implying when he says that this place is a place of wrath and tears? And then looms but the horror of the shade. Remember what I said about capitalizing something. The horror. The horror is a thing, a visceral, real thing, a tangible thing. And yet the menace of years. And we can think of this as enduring our suffering, thinking about Viktor Frankl, finding meaning in our suffering, because at the end it finds and shall find him unafraid. Despite the horror of the shade, despite the menace of the years, he finds himself, and you shall find him unafraid. So now for the final stanza. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. And so there's a quote from the Bible that says, "Strait is the gate and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life." And in this poem, Invictus, he's using this kind of familiar writing when he says, "It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll." And he says, "I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." And so throughout the poem, he describes adversity as situations that he doesn't necessarily like, whether it's a night that covers him black as the pit from pole to pole, his environment perhaps in the fell clutch of circumstance, not despite maybe perhaps being a victim to circumstance, he doesn't complain, he doesn't cry about it, he is beaten down at times, but he is unbowed. He stands up proud despite it. And again, thinking about Viktor Frankl, like we discussed in Reading and Rap, suffering and how we can find meaning in suffering. And then beyond this place, he talks about our world, the earth, our life, implying what about life here? Don't forget that. What is that implying about life here? And that despite this all, he is the captain of his soul, the master of his fate. And so thank you for listening in Project Return. A lot of times when I think about this poem, I think about when circumstances are out of my control and I have an opportunity to maintain my sense of strength and ensure that I am not bowed. I am not made a victim of my circumstances. I choose how I'm going to approach the world. And our ability to survive adversity can come down to this choice of our attitude. And like I always say, I like to stick with my attitude of gratitude. You know me, guys. Okay, so thank you for listening into our poem and my thoughts about it. And I wish I could have had your discussion with us, because it's always so fascinating to hear where you guys drive the discussion about the poem. It's amazing. But hopefully this little bit of guided discussion gave you something to think about. So if you have time and you're inspired to do so, I encourage you to write what the poem means to you and what you took away from the poem. And then, as always, try your hand at a poem of your own, following the same kind of themes and thoughts, and perhaps making it rhyme. Thank you guys so much. You guys have a great day.